The black boy held up his scratched scooter with trembling hands. "Please buy it, sir," Mom said. "It's all we have left." The biker almost said no, almost kept riding. But then he asked one question and uncovered a crime so big it would take 300 bikers and one 8-year-old's courage to bring down an empire. The sun was bleeding into the horizon when Jake Ryder's Harley roared past the Welcome to Pineville sign. Behind him, 12 more bikes thundered down the empty highway, their engines drowning out everything else. The Iron Stallions weren't just a riding club. They were a brotherhood forged in oil, chrome, and a code most people had forgotten existed. Gas up ahead. Marcus shouted over the wind, pointing to a weathered station just off the exit. Jake nodded and signaled the turn. They had 300 miles left to the rally in Arizona, and his tank was running on fumes. The bikes peeled off the highway one by one, their leather-clad riders stretching and groaning as they killed their engines. "Man, I'm getting too old for these cross-country rides," Big Tommy muttered, cracking his back. "You say that every year?" Jake grinned, pulling off his helmet. At 42, with silver streaking through his dark beard, he looked like someone who'd lived 3 lifetimes. "And every year, you're first in line when we roll out." The gas station was the kind of place time forgot. Peeling paint, a single pump that probably predated the internet, and a bell that dinged when you walked into the attached convenience store. A bored teenager barely looked up from his phone as the bikers filed in for water and snacks. Jake was filling his tank when he heard the voice. "Sir," he turned. A kid stood there. Couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Skinny with a tight cap of black curls that hadn't seen a comb in days. But it was his eyes that got Jake's attention. They were too old for his face, carrying a weight no child should know. "Yeah, buddy." The boy held up a small scooter. It was blue once, maybe, but now was scratched to hell. One handlebar wrapped in duct tape, wheel scuffed, nearly bald. "Want to buy my scooter?" His voice cracked. Mom said, "It's the last thing we own." The other bikers who'd gathered around started chuckling. "Kid's got a sales pitch." Razor laughed. But Jake didn't laugh. He'd grown up poor, the kind of poor where you ate ketchup sandwiches and called it dinner. He recognized desperation when he saw it. "How much you asking?" Jake kept his voice gentle. $20. The boy's voice lifted with hope, then immediately deflated. Or 10, or whatever you think is fair. Jake crouched down, bringing himself to the kid's level. Up close, he could see the dirt ground into the boy's jeans, the bruises on his knees that didn't look like they came from just playing. And the way he kept glancing over his shoulder like he'd lost something precious and couldn't stop looking for it. "What's your name, son?" "Jamal." "Jamal. I'm Jake." He extended his hand, and the boy shook it with surprising firmness. "That's a good-looking scooter you got there. Why are you selling it?" Jamal's chin trembled. "We don't have a house anymore. Mom says we need money for food, and he wiped his nose with the back of his hand. They took everything. Our whole street just gone." The laughter died. The bikers exchanged glances. "What do you mean gone?" Jake asked quietly. "The big trucks came last night. Really loud ones. Men in masks told everyone to get out. Right now, no time to pack anything. Mom grabbed me and we ran. When the sun came up, Jamal's voice dropped to a whisper. Everything was flat. Like our house never existed. Jake felt something cold settle in his gut. "Where are your folks now? Mom's over there." Jamal pointed to a woman sitting on the curb outside the gas station. She was maybe 30 but looked 50, face hollow with exhaustion, staring at nothing. "She's been crying all day. I thought if I could sell my scooter, maybe she'd stop crying." Marcus stepped closer, his smile gone. "Kid, what kind of trucks? Do they have city markings?" "Police." Jamal shook his head. Just big, and the men had skulls on their jackets. Jake's blood ran cold. He knew those jackets. Every biker within 500 miles knew those jackets. "Graveyard dogs," he muttered. "What?" Razor's eyes widened. "Those sellout bastards? What the hell are they doing?" "Demolition work." "They're not." Jake stood up, his jaw tight. "They're doing something worse." He pulled out his wallet and handed Jamal a $100 bill. The boy's eyes went wide as dinner plates. "Sir, I can't. The scooter's not worth." "Keep the scooter, kid. That's for you and your mom. Get her some food." "Okay." Jake ruffled his curls. "Where's this street of yours?" "Jake, come on!" Big Tommy groaned. "We're already behind schedule. The rally can wait." Jake's voice had an edge that made everyone shut up. "Jamal, show me the woman." Keisha. She said her name didn't trust him at first. Jake couldn't blame her. 13 bikers showing up after you've lost. Everything probably felt like the universe piling on, but young Jamal vouched for them, and desperation had a way of making you accept help from unlikely places. They followed her battered Toyota Corolla to the edge of town, where houses gave way to fields, or where houses used to be. Jake killed his engine and just stared. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Where Keisha pointed and said, "That was my home," there was nothing but crushed drywall, splintered wood, and broken memories. A child's bicycle flattened, a mailbox bent in half, someone's family photos scattered across the dirt, boot prints across the smiling faces. 12 houses gone, erased like they never existed. They said it was legal. Keisha's voice was hollow. "The sheriff came this morning, said it was a pre-planned development, said we should have known, but we never got any notice. No letters, no warnings, nothing. We went to sleep in our homes and woke up homeless." Jake walked through the rubble, his boots crunching on broken glass. The others followed, unusually quiet. These are men who'd seen rough things, lived rough lives. But this was different. This was families, kids. "This wasn't government," Marcus said, kneeling by a tire track pressed deep into the mud. "Look at this. Custom wheels, heavy treads." Jake pulled out his phone and took a picture. Then another and another. His mind was racing, connecting dots. He didn't want to connect. "Keisha," he called out. "The men in masks. Did you see what bikes they rode?" "Bikes?" She looked confused. They had trucks, but yeah, some were on motorcycles. Big ones. They had skulls painted on the tanks, and they were laughing while people cried. Jake's fists clenched so hard his knuckles went white. The graveyard dogs weren't just his rivals. They were everything wrong with biker culture. Sellouts who'd traded loyalty and honor for corporate money, running protection rackets, doing dirty work for whoever paid. He'd kicked them out of 3 states personally. But this was a new low even for them. "Pack it up," Jake said quietly. "We heading to Arizona?" Razor asked hopefully. Jake turned, and something in his eyes made them all take a step back. It was the look he got before things got biblical. "Change of plans, boys. We got a neighborhood to find and some dogs to put down." Big Tommy sighed. "I knew we weren't making that rally." Young Jamal tugged on Jake's jacket. "Mr. Jake, are you really going to help us?" Jake crouched down again, looking the boy straight in the eye. "Jamal, I'm going to do more than help. I'm going to find out who did this, and I'm going to make sure they regret the day they ever rolled into your town." He stood, pulling his helmet back on. The sun had set completely now, and in the darkness his bike's headlight cut through the dust like a blade. "Iron Stallions," he called out. "We ride." 12 engines roared to life, shattering the quiet grief of the demolished street. They had no idea they were about to uncover something far bigger and far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. Dawn broke cold and gray over Pineville. Jake hadn't slept. None of them had. They'd spent the night in the gas station parking lot. Bikes circled like wagons, passing coffee and cigarettes while Jamal and Keisha slept in her car. When the boy woke up, Jake was already on his third cup of truck stop coffee, studying the photos on his phone. "You really stayed?" Jamal said, wonder in his voice. "Told you Jake showed him the screen? These tire tracks, you see how deep they are? Whatever ran over your street wasn't just heavy. It was modified military-grade stuff." Marcus leaned over his shoulder. "That's not construction equipment, boss. That's tactical." "Exactly." Jake zoomed in on another photo, and look here. Boot prints. "See the tread pattern? That's not work boots. That's combat gear." Keisha climbed out of her car, hair a mess, eyes red. "I talked to the other families last night. 5 of them are staying at the church. 3 more with relatives in the next town over. Mrs. Washington, she's 84. She's sleeping in her car because she's got nowhere else to go. Something twisted in Jake's chest. We need to talk to them. All of them." "Why?" Keisha's voice was sharp with exhaustion. "What's talking going to do? Our homes are gone." "The sheriff says, it's legal. We're nobodies. Who's going to listen?" Jake stood towering over her, but his voice was gentle. "I am. And once I know the whole story, a lot of other people are going to listen too. Trust me." By 10 a.m., they gathered everyone at the small Baptist church on Main Street. 17 families, 43 people total, all with the same hollow look in their eyes. The pastor, an elderly black man named Reverend Mills, provided the space and didn't ask questions when 13 bikers walked in. Jake stood at the front, and despite his leather vest and road-worn appearance, he commanded the room. "My name's Jake Ryder. I know you got no reason to trust us, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Every detail, no matter how small." An older man raised his hand. "They came at 3 a.m. "Exactly. I remember because I was up with my medication. Heard the trucks before I saw them. Thought it was an earthquake at first. They had flashlights," a young mother added. "Really bright ones. Shined them right in our windows, banged on doors. Gave us 5 minutes to get out. 5 minutes." Razor's voice was sharp. "That ain't legal. Even with a proper demolition order, you get 30 days notice minimum. They said we forfeited our rights." Another man spoke up. "Said the land was condemned 6 months ago, that we'd all been notified, but none of us got any paperwork." "Nothing." Jake felt the pieces clicking together. "Anyone get names, badge numbers?" Silence. Then Mrs. Washington spoke up, her accent thick, but her words clear. "Novagus. I asked to see identification." The man laughed at me. He had a skull ring. "Big one." "Silver graveyard dogs," Marcus confirmed quietly. "Did any of them say why?" Jake pressed. "What's being built there?" Keisha shook her head. "The sheriff said commercial development wouldn't give details. Told us to file complaints with the county if we had issues, but the county office says there's no record of any demolition order for our street because there isn't one." Jake said, "This wasn't official. This was a land grab dressed up to look legal." "But why?" Jamal's small voice cut through. "Our street wasn't special, just old houses. Who'd want that?" Jake pulled up a map on his phone, zooming into Pineville. "Where exactly was your neighborhood?" Keisha pointed. "Right here, Maple Street, edge of town, backed up to the old railway line." Jake's eyes narrowed. He zoomed out, following the railway line with his finger. It led straight to the highway junction, the main artery connecting 3 major cities. Prime real estate for logistics, warehousing, distribution centers. "It's not about your houses," he said slowly. "It's about the land underneath them. That railway access makes this property worth millions to the right buyer." "So, Someone just takes it. Keisha's voice cracked. They can just destroy our lives and get away with it. Not if I have anything to say about it. Jake turned to Marcus. Get on the phone. I need property records for Maple Street going back 5 years. I need to know who filed for permits, who owns the land now, everything on it. Jake addressed the room again. I need you all to write down everything you remember. Times, faces, exact words they said. We're building a case against who? Reverend Mills asked. Son, even if you prove this was illegal, these people have money. Lawyers, they'll bury us in paperwork for years. Jake's smile was cold. Reverend, I don't work through lawyers. I work through leverage, and I'm about to find out who's pulling the strings. He turned to his crew. Big Tommy Razor, I want you riding the perimeter of that demolished block. Look for surveillance cameras, witnesses, anything. Marcus, those property records. Dog, check in with our contacts in the dog's territory. Find out if they're bragging about this job. And you? Keisha asked. Jake's eyes were hard as flint. I'm going to pay a visit to the sheriff. Time to see how deep this corruption runs. Young Jamal grabbed his hand. Be careful, Mr. Jake. The sheriff. He wasn't nice when Mom tried to talk to him. Jake squeezed the boy's hand. Jamal, I've stared down worse things than small-town cops. Your job is to stay here, stay safe, and help your mom. Can you do that? The boy nodded, trying to look brave. As the bikers filed out, Reverend Mills pulled Jake aside. You really think you can help these people? Jake looked back at the families huddled in the church pews, refugees in their own town. Reverend, I don't think I know because whoever did this made one big mistake. What's that? They messed with someone under my protection, and I don't forgive. I don't forget Jake's jaw set like stone, and I sure as hell don't lose. He walked out into the morning sun, already planning his next move. The war had just begun. The sheriff's office was a squat brick building that had seen better days. Jake pushed through the door, alone, leaving his crew outside. Sometimes intimidation worked better solo. The deputy at the front desk looked up, saw the leather vest and road dust, and his hand drifted toward his sidearm. Easy, son, Jake said calmly. Just here to talk to Sheriff Brennan about the Maple Street situation. Sheriff's busy. I'll wait. Jake sat down in a plastic chair that groaned under his weight, crossed his arms, and stared at the deputy without blinking. It was a trick he'd learned in prison. Patience could be more unsettling than aggression. 20 minutes later, a pot-bellied man in his 50s emerged from the back office. Sheriff Brennan had the look of someone who'd spent too many years taking the easy way out. You with those Maple Street people? Brennan's tone was dismissive. I'm with the truth, Jake stood. Want to explain how a whole neighborhood gets demolished without proper notice? All legal and proper. They were notified months ago. Not my fault people don't read their mail. Funny thing about that, Jake stepped closer because the county has no record of any permits or notifications. So, either you're lying or you're incompetent. Which is it? Brennan's face reddened. You better watch your mouth, biker. I can have you. You can have me. What? Jake's voice dropped to something dangerous. Arrested for asking questions. That'll look great when a news crew shows up. And trust me, Sheriff, they're coming. The two men stared at each other. Finally, Brennan sneered. Development's good for this town. Those houses were falling apart anyway. Progress happens. People need to accept that progress doesn't happen at 3 a.m., with masked men and no paperwork. Jake leaned in. Who's paying you, Brennan? Who's got you in their pocket? Get out of my office. I'm going, but I'll be back. With lawyers, with reporters, with every piece of evidence I can find. Jake headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and Sheriff, when this all comes out, and it will, you better hope you cut a deal fast because whoever you're protecting, they're not going to protect you back. Outside, Marcus was waiting with his laptop balanced on his bike seat. Boss, you need to see this. Jake looked over his shoulder. The property records were pulled up, highlighted in yellow. Maple Street was owned by the residents. Individual deeds all paid off. But 3 months ago, a company called Pineville Development, LLC, filed a claim saying the land was purchased at a tax auction 2 years back. Was it? There was no tax auction. The residents paid their taxes on time every year. This LLC just created documentation out of thin air. Jake felt his blood pressure rising. Who owns this LLC? Marcus clicked through screens. That's where it gets interesting. It's a shell company registered in Delaware, owned by another shell company, owned by another. But I kept digging, and at the top of the pyramid, he turned the screen. Hayes Development Corporation. CEO Victor Hayes. Jake's eyes widened. Victor Hayes. The Victor Hayes. The one and only real estate mogul. City council connections in 6 states, known for buying up distressed properties. He's been accused of predatory development practices before, but nothing ever sticks because he's got lawyers and money and politicians in his pocket. Jake finished. But why use the graveyard dogs? Why not just legal pressure? Because legal takes time, Big Tommy said, rolling up on his bike. And time lets people organize, fight back, get media attention this way. Boom! Neighborhood gone overnight. People scattered. No organized resistance. Razor pulled up from his perimeter ride, face grim. Found something you're going to want to see. They rode back to Maple Street. The demolished block looked even worse in daylight. A scar on the earth. Raw and ugly. Razor led them to the far corner where a railway line ran. Check it. He pointed at tire tracks deeply embedded in the mud. These weren't from last night. These are old, maybe a week. See how the mud dried in the treads? Jake crouched down his experienced eye, reading the story in the dirt. Custom treads, wide-set wheels, heavy load capacity. He pulled out his phone and compared them to photos in his gang's database, a collection of identifying marks they compiled over years of territorial disputes. His blood ran cold. Graveyard dogs, he confirmed. But look at the depth. They were carrying something heavy, really heavy. Marcus knelt beside him. Survey equipment. Maybe they were scoping this place before the demolition. More than scoping, Jake stood, following the tire tracks. They led away from the demolished houses toward the old railway depot half a mile down. They were setting up. This wasn't a one-night operation. They planned this. Boss, Dog called out from across the lot. Got fresh oil stains here and cigarette butts. At least 50 of them. Someone was here for hours recently. Jake walked over, picked up one of the butts. The brand was unmistakable. Skull's Menthol, the graveyard dog's signature smoke. They're still here, Jake said quietly. Or close by. They wouldn't leave their staging ground unless the job was completely done. Maybe they're waiting to see if anyone fights back, Marcus suggested. Then let's give them a fight. Jake pulled out his phone and started texting. I'm calling in markers. We need eyes on every graveyard dog's hangout within 100 miles. Bars, clubhouses, chop shops everywhere. Jake, you really want to start a war with the dogs? Big Tommy asked carefully. They're not the crew they used to be, but they're still 50 strong. Maybe more. We're 13 and 13 angry. Razor grinned. Jake looked at the destroyed homes. Thought of Jamal's scared eyes and Keisha's hollow exhaustion. Thought of 17 families with nowhere to go. This isn't about numbers, he said. This is about right and wrong. The dogs sold their souls a long time ago. Now they're taking homes from kids, from grandmothers. His voice hardened. Yeah, Tommy. I want a war because some things are worth fighting for. His phone buzzed. A text from an old friend in the next county. Dogs were at Rusty's bar last night. Celebrating. Heard them talking about the Pineville job. They're using the old steel mill as a base. West side of town. Be careful, brother. Jake showed the message to his crew. Steel mill's abandoned. Marcus said, No witnesses. easy to defend. Smart, smart, Jake agreed. But not smart enough because now we know where they are. What's the play? Razor cracked his knuckles. Jake looked at each of his brothers. These were men who'd followed him through hell and back. Men who valued loyalty over comfort, justice over safety. Tonight, he said, we pay the graveyard dogs a visit, but we're not going in hot. First, we watch, we learn. We find out who's giving orders and where Victor Hayes fits into this. And then Jake's smile was wolfish. Then we make them wish they'd never heard of Maple Street. He started his bike, the engine's roar echoing across the destroyed neighborhood like a promise. The hunt was on. The steel mill loomed against the night sky like a sleeping giant. Abandoned 15 years ago when the factory jobs dried up, it was now a maze of rusted catwalks, empty warehouses, and shadows deep enough to hide an army. Perfect for the graveyard dogs. Perfect for Jake's plan. Kill the engines here, Jake whispered a quarter-mile out. The bikers coasted to a stop in a grove of trees, darkness swallowing them whole. They'd left half the crew back at the church. Big Tommy, Dog, and 3 others to protect the families in case this was a setup. That left Jake with 6 men: Marcus, Razor, Snake, Widow, Chains, and Demo. All veterans, all dangerous. Jake pulled out binoculars, scanning the mill's perimeter. 2 guards at the main gate, 3 bikes parked by the south entrance. Lights on in the old foreman's office, 2nd floor. That's where they'd run operations from, Marcus murmured. High ground, good sight lines. We go in quiet. No confrontation tonight. We're ghosts. We see everything. Touch nothing. Leave no trace. Razor grinned. I miss the old days when we could just bust heads and ask questions later. We're not young and stupid anymore, Jake shot back. Well, not as young anyway. They moved through the darkness like smoke. Years of riding together, creating an almost telepathic coordination. Jake led them around the perimeter fence, finding a section where rust had eaten through the chain link. One by one they slipped inside. The mill was a labyrinth. Conveyor belts frozen in time. Massive furnaces cold for over a decade. Offices with paperwork still scattered across desks, like everyone had just walked away one day and never came back. Jake heard voices ahead. Low laughter, the clink of beer bottles. He held up a fist, and everyone froze. Through a grimy window, he could see 6 graveyard dogs sitting around a table playing cards. Their bikes were parked just inside the bay door, chrome skulls gleaming in the fluorescent light. But it was the office above them that drew Jake's attention. Light spilled from the windows, and he could see shadows moving inside. He tapped Marcus and pointed up. They needed to get closer. Using the old maintenance stairs, they climbed slowly, testing each step before putting weight on it. The metal groaned occasionally, but the dogs below were too loud to notice. Jake reached the office level and pressed himself against the wall outside the lit room. Through the door's frosted glass, he could see multiple figures. He pulled out his phone, switched it to record, and held it up to the gap under the door. Voices filtered through, told Hayes it was clean. No witnesses, no evidence. Sheriff bought and paid for that was Skull, the dog's leader. Jake recognized the gravelly voice. What about those families? Another voice, younger. What about them? They're scattered, broke, scared. Who's going to listen to homeless nobodies? Skull laughed. By the time they get their shit together, Hayes will own half the county. The railway deal closes next week. $50 million for logistics rights alone. $50 million. Someone whistled. Our cut's going to be sweet. $2 million like we agreed. Plus we get to operate freely in 3 counties. Hayes has the politicians locked down. Jake's jaw clenched. $2 million. That's what 17 families' homes were worth to these bastards. What if someone digs deeper? The younger voice asked. They won't. We were in and out in 4 hours. No trail, no proof, Just a bunch of poor people's word against official documentation. And if they get lawyers, Hayes has lawyers that make lawyers cry. Relax. This is what we do. We're the ghost crew. We make problems disappear. We get paid. Everyone wins. Except the families. They're collateral damage. This is business. Jake pulled his phone back, his hands shaking with rage. He had everything he needed. Confession, dollar amounts, Hayes's name directly connected to the dogs. He was about to signal retreat when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A sneeze, a small childish sneeze from a stairwell behind them. Jake spun around, and his heart stopped. Jamal stood there in the shadows, holding his phone up like he'd been recording too. The boy's eyes went wide with fear. "I wanted to help," Jamal whispered. "I followed you from the church." "And who's there?" Skull's voice boomed from inside the office. "Move." Jake grabbed Jamal, pulling him toward the emergency exit. "Go, go, go!" Behind them, the office door crashed open. Footsteps thundered across metal. Shouts echoed through the mill. "Intruders, lock it down!" Jake and his crew ran through the darkness. Jamal clutched under Jake's arm like a football. Razor and Marcus laid down cover, knocking over barrels and equipment to slow their pursuers. They hit the ground floor running. The dogs' playing cards were already on their feet, reaching for chains and tire irons. Through the loading bay, Widow shouted. They burst through a side door just as the first dog caught up. Chains spun around and delivered a crushing right hook that sent the man sprawling. Then they were running across the open ground toward the fence. Engines roared to life behind them. The dogs were mounting up. "They're coming!" Snake yelled. They reached their bikes, and Jake practically threw Jamal onto the back of his Harley. "Hold on and don't let go. I am sorry. I am sorry." Jamal was crying. "Later, kid. Right now, just hold on." 6 engines roared to life. Behind them, at least a dozen dogs poured out of the mill, their headlights cutting through the darkness like angry eyes. "Split up," Jake commanded. "Meet at the church. Go." The iron stallions scattered in different directions, bikes screaming down back roads and through fields. Jake took the highway, opening his throttle all the way. Jamal's small arms locked around his waist, the boy's face pressed against his back. In his mirror, Jake saw 3 sets of headlights giving chase. "Come on, baby," he muttered to his bike. "Show me what you got." The speedometer climbed 70, 80, 90. The dogs were fast, but Jake knew these roads, knew every curve and straightaway. He leaned into turns at angles that should have been impossible, the bike responding like an extension of his body. Jamal didn't scream. The kid had guts. Jake led the dogs on a 20-minute chase through the countryside, before finally losing them on a series of dirt roads that would tear apart their custom bikes. By the time he rolled into the church parking lot, his hands were cramping from gripping the handlebars so hard. The rest of his crew arrived minutes later, all accounted for. Some bruises, 1 split lip, but everyone alive. Big Tommy rushed out. "What the hell happened?" Jake helped Jamal down, and the boy immediately burst into tears. "I am sorry. I just wanted to help. I thought if I got video too." Keisha ran out and grabbed her son, holding him like she'd never let go. "Jamal, what were you thinking? You could have been killed." But Jake knelt down beside the crying boy. "Jamal, look at me." The boy lifted his tear-streaked face. "Did you get video?" Jamal nodded, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Before they saw me, I got all of it." Jake took the phone, played back the recording. It was shaky, shot from a bad angle, but the audio was crystal clear. Skull's voice, the confession, the dollar amounts, Hayes's name, everything. Jake looked at Jamal and slowly smiled. "Kid, you just gave us the smoking gun. Really? Really? You're braver than half the men I know." He stood, addressing his crew. Change of plans. We're not just fighting the dogs anymore. We're taking this all the way to the top. We're going after Victor Hayes. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. You want to go after one of the richest developers in the state? I want to burn his empire to the ground, Jake said coldly. And now we've got the match. Morning came too fast. Jake had spent the night making copies of the video, encrypting files, sending evidence to secure servers. By sunrise, he'd contacted 3 journalists, 2 lawyers who owed him favors, and a state investigator he'd helped years ago. But Skull wasn't going to wait for the legal system to grind forward. Jake was on his second cup of coffee when his phone rang. Unknown number. Yeah, Ryder. Skull's voice was like gravel in a blender. We need to talk. Nothing to talk about. I've got everything I need. See, that's where you're wrong. You've got a video that proves nothing without context. My lawyers will tear it apart, taken out of context, illegally obtained, all that legal, but you broke into private property. That's a felony. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. Get to the point. The point is, you're messing with something bigger than your little hero complex can handle. Victor Hayes owns this town. Hell, he owns half the state. You think one shaky phone video is going to stop him? I think 17 homeless families might disagree. Those families are going to get a nice settlement offer by end of day. 20 grand each. Maybe 30 if they sign NDAs and disappear quietly. You're going to cost them that money. Ryder, you're going to make this hard for everyone. Blood money. They won't take it. Skull laughed. You ever been poor, Jake? Really poor? 20 grand is a year's rent. It's food on the table. It's not having your kid ask why you're sleeping in the car. They'll take it. Everyone has a price. Not everyone. Jake's voice dropped. Meet me. You and me. Let's settle this the old way. The old way. What is this? 1987. We don't do fists and honor anymore. Old man. We do business. We do money. We do what works. You do what you're told by men in suits. You sold out, Skull. You used to be somebody. Now you're just Hayes' attack dog. Silence on the line. Jake had hit a nerve. Steel noon. Just you and me. Skull's voice was ice. We'll see who's the dog. The line went dead. Marcus looked up from his laptop. Please tell me you're not actually going. Of course I'm going. It's a trap, boss. You know it's a trap. Probably Jake stood stretching his back. But Skull's pride won't let him admit he's taking orders from a real estate developer. I insulted him. He'll show, and when he does, I'll get him talking on record. And if he brings the whole pack, Jake smiled grimly. Then you bring ours. The steel mill looked different in daylight. Less menacing, more pathetic, just a monument to dead industry and forgotten workers. Jake rode in alone, as agreed, but his crew was positioned a quarter-mile out, ready to move if things went sideways. Skull was waiting in the main yard, sitting on his bike. He was a big man, 6'3" and solid muscle, with a shaved head covered in tattoos and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Behind him, at least 20 graveyard dogs lined up on their bikes. Thought we said one-on-one, Jake called out, stopping 50 feet away. I lied. Skull grinned. But hey, old time's sake, I'll give you a chance to walk. Leave town, forget about Maple Street, and nobody gets hurt. Can't do that. Why were these people to you? You met them yesterday. Jake killed his engine and dismounted. You wouldn't understand. You forgot what loyalty means. Loyalty, Skull laughed, and his crew joined in. Loyalty doesn't pay rent, Ryder. Loyalty doesn't put food on the table. I got men to feed, families to support. Hayes pays us $2 million for one night's work. That's loyalty to my crew. That's slavery with better benefits. Jake walked forward slowly. You used to stand for something, Skull. We both did. We were brothers once. Remember? Same club, same code. Then you chose money and you chose pride. How's that working out? You still scraping by, taking odd jobs, living rally to rally? Skull shook his head. We're not kids anymore, Jake. The world changed. I changed with it. You're just too stubborn to see you're extinct. Maybe, but I can still look myself in the mirror. Mira doesn't pay bills. They stood 10 feet apart now, the air crackling with tension. Last chance, Skull said. Walk away, make me. Skull's grin vanished. Wrong answer, he charged. Jake had been in hundreds of fights, but Skull was a freight train. They collided like thunder, fists flying, decades of rivalry exploding in pure violence. Skull was bigger, but Jake was faster, slipping punches and landing brutal body shots. They crashed into the dirt, rolling, grappling. Skull got on top, raining down hammer fists. Jake bucked him off, rolled to his feet, tasted blood. Still got it, old man. Skull wheezed. But you're outmanned and outgunned. Jake wiped his mouth. Am I? A roar of engines filled the air. The iron stallions thundered into the yard, but not just his crew. There were others, lots of others. Bikes Jake recognized from a dozen different clubs, old allies he called in favors from overnight. 30, 40, 50 riders, maybe more. Skull's face went pale. What the? You're not the only one with a crew, Jake said. Difference is mine actually gives a damn about something other than money. Big Tommy pulled up next to Jake along with Razor, Marcus, and 24 more riders, including some old faces Jake hadn't seen in years. Word had spread through the biker underground like wildfire. The Iron Stallions needed help. Brothers answered. Now, Jake said, spitting blood. You want to do this the hard way or you want to walk? Skull looked at his 20 men, then at Jake's 50. The math wasn't hard. This isn't over, Ryder. Yeah, it is because in about 30 seconds, the state police are going to roll up here with a warrant for your arrest. That video got delivered to them this morning along with financial records linking your club to Hayes Development. You're done, Skull. Question is whether you go down alone or you take your whole crew with you. Skull's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Am I? For the first time, Jake saw something he'd never seen in Skull's eyes. Fear. Your choice, Jake said quietly. Cooperate with the investigation. Testify against Hayes. Maybe you do 2 years. Or stay loyal to a man who will throw you under the bus the second it's convenient. What's it going to be? The sirens are close now. Skull looked at his crew. Men who suddenly looked very nervous. Stand down, Skull said finally, his voice defeated. Stand down. The graveyard dogs killed their engines. Within minutes, state police vehicles poured into the yard, officers emerging with weapons drawn. But they weren't looking at Jake's crew. They were looking at the dogs. A detective Jake had sent the evidence to walked up, nodding respectfully. Mr. Ryder, thanks for the tip. We'll take it from here. As the dogs were being cuffed and read their rights, Skull caught Jake's eye. I won last time. You know, Hayes is just going to lawyer up and walk, right? Men like him don't go down. Jake smiled coldly. They do when the whole world's watching, and trust me, Skull, by tomorrow morning the whole world's going to know Victor Hayes's name. He climbed back on his bike, his crew falling in around him. That was insane, Marcus said as they rode away. How do you know the cops would show? Because I spent all night making sure they had no choice. I sent that video to every news station, every journalist, every politician I could find. By noon today, this story is going viral. Hayes can't hide from that. So, what's next? Jake's jaw set with determination. Next, we take the fight to his front door. We make him famous for all the wrong reasons. You really think we can win this? Jamal asked me that same question. Know what I told him? What? We already won. We just need to make Hayes realize it. The video went viral within 6 hours. Jamal's shaky footage combined with Jake's professional recording spread across social media like wildfire. Maple Street, Justice started trending. News vans appeared in Pineville by evening. Keisha and the other families found themselves suddenly surrounded by cameras, microphones, and reporters hungry for the human story behind the scandal. Jake watched from the church steps as a CNN reporter interviewed Mrs. Washington. "They took everything," the elderly woman said, her voice cracking. "My husband and I worked 40 years to own that house. 40 years gone in one night." The reporter turned to the camera. 17 families displaced, millions in fraudulent development deals, and at the center of it all, Victor Hayes, one of the state's most powerful developers. The question everyone's asking, how deep does this corruption go? Jake's phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Messages from bikers across the country, from clubs he'd ridden with, fought alongside, or even fought against. The code was simple. When one of the Brotherhood called for help against real evil, you answered. By nightfall, the church parking lot looked like a biker convention. Riders from 6 states had shown up, their leather vests bearing names Jake hadn't heard in years. The Desert Scorpions from Arizona, the Northern Wolves from Montana, the Coastal Riders from California, even the Widow's Sons, a club of law enforcement officers who rode in their off hours. "This is insane," Marcus said, looking at the sea of bikes. "There's got to be 200 riders here." 236, Jake corrected, having counted. "And more coming tomorrow." Big Tommy whistled. "Hayes is going to crap his pants when he sees this. That's the idea." Jake climbed onto his bike and stood on the seat, raising his voice. "Listen up." The crowd quieted, hundreds of eyes turning toward him. "Most of you don't know me personally, but you came because the code still means something. Because when families get crushed by greed, somebody's got to stand up. That's us. That's what we do." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Victor Hayes thinks money makes him untouchable. He thinks lawyers and politicians will protect him. He thinks we're just some angry bikers who will make noise for a few days, then disappear. Jake's voice hardened. "He's wrong." A roar went up from the assembled riders. Tomorrow morning, we ride, all of us, to the state capitol, to Hayes Development Headquarters. We're going to park 300 bikes right in front of his building, and we're not leaving until he answers for what he did. "What if the cops try to move us?" someone shouted. "They won't," a voice called out. Jake turned to see Captain Frank Morrison of the Widow's Sons, a 20-year police veteran. "I've been coordinating with local PD. As long as we keep it peaceful, we have the right to assemble." "The permits are already filed, and if Hayes sends more dogs," another rider asked. "The dogs are done," Jake said. "Skull's in custody, half his crew's cooperating with investigators. The rest scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Hayes's muscle is gone." "What about Hayes himself?" This from a woman rider in the front. "Man like that has security, bodyguards, lawyers on speed dial." Jake smiled grimly. "Let him hide behind his lawyers. We're not there to fight him. We're there to expose him. I've got 5 news crews confirmed to cover the ride. Social media influencers, bloggers, every journalist I could contact. By the time we're done, Victor Hayes' face will be synonymous with corruption." "And if it's not enough?" Marcus asked quietly, so only Jake could hear. "If he still walks, then we adapt. But right now we've got momentum, public opinion, evidence. We use what we have." Jake looked at his old friend. "You think I should stop?" "I think you should be careful. Men like Hayes don't go down easy. They fight dirty. Good thing we fight dirtier." That night, Jake found young Jamal sitting alone behind the church, staring at a scooter. "Can't sleep?" Jake asked, sitting beside him. "Everyone keeps talking about me, about my video. They say I'm brave." Jamal looked up, his eyes uncertain. "But I was scared, Mr. Jake, really scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway." "Were you scared when you fought that big bald guy?" Jake chuckled. "Skull?" "Yeah, I was scared. He's mean as a rattlesnake and twice as ugly." Jamal giggled, then grew serious. "Do you think we'll get our house back?" Jake chose his words carefully. "I think we're going to make sure you and your mom have a home. Maybe not the same one, but somewhere safe, somewhere nobody can take from you. Mom cries at night. She tries to be quiet, but I hear her. Jake's chest tightened. She's scared too, buddy. She's trying to be strong for you, the same way you're trying to be strong for her. That's what families do. Are you going to leave after this is over? The question caught Jake off guard. Eventually, the road's kind of my home. Oh, Jamal's disappointment was palpable. Jake put a hand on the boy's shoulder. But that doesn't mean we stop being friends. And it doesn't mean I won't check in. Make sure you're okay. You're stuck with me now, kid, whether you like it or not. Jamal smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from him. I like it. Keisha appeared around. Jamal! Bedtime. We got a big day tomorrow. She saw Jake and nodded. Thank you for everything. Haven't done anything yet. You gave us hope. That's everything. As they walked away, Marcus joined Jake in the darkness. You getting attached? Maybe. That's dangerous in our line of work. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Jake stood, looking at the sea of bikes, the gathering storm of leather and chrome. You know what's funny? 3 days ago, we were just heading to a rally. Couple weeks of riding, drinking, forgetting our problems. And now we're about to declare war on a billionaire. Jake grinned. Think we bit off more than we can chew. Marcus grinned back. Nah, we'll be fine. Probably. Definitely. Maybe. Marcus clapped him on the back. Get some sleep, boss. Tomorrow we make history. Jake looked up at the stars, thinking about a little boy with a scooter, a mother who'd lost everything, and 17 families who deserved better than what they got. History, he muttered. Hell, I'd settle for justice. But tomorrow, they'd ride. 300 strong, and Victor Hayes would learn that some people couldn't be bought, intimidated, or silenced. Some people just didn't know how to quit. The Iron Stallions revved their engines as dawn broke, and the sound was like thunder, promising a storm. The ride to the Capitol was biblical. 300 motorcycles stretched for miles along the highway, a river of chrome and defiance. Jake led the pack. Young Jamal clinging to his back, wearing a helmet someone had donated, bright blue with flames on the sides. The boy had begged to come. Keisha had reluctantly agreed, on the condition he stayed close to Jake at all times. News helicopters circled overhead. Drivers on the highway honked in support, holding up phones to record the spectacle. By the time they reached the city limits, Water Biker Justice Ride was trending nationwide. Hayes Development Headquarters was a gleaming glass tower in the financial district. 30 stories of steel and arrogance. Jake led the convoy into the plaza in front of the building, bikes fanning out in perfect formation. 300 engines cut simultaneously, leaving an eerie silence. Then Jake hit his horn once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed off the buildings like a battle cry. Pedestrians stopped and stared. Office workers pressed their faces against windows. Security guards poured out of the building looking panicked and completely unprepared for what they were facing. Jake dismounted, helping Jamal down. The news crews were already setting up, cameras rolling. Mr. Ryder, a reporter, shoved a microphone in his face. What's your message to Victor Hayes? My message? Jake looked directly at the camera. Come down and face the people you hurt. Stop hiding behind lawyers and money. Show the world what kind of man you really are. The crowd of bikers behind him roared approval, revving engines for emphasis. Inside the building, Jake could see movement, chaos, people running, phones being dialed frantically. Then on the top floor, a figure appeared in the window. Even from ground level, Jake could feel the man staring down at them. Victor Hayes. Marcus pulled up alongside Jake. Security's calling the cops. 5 minutes, maybe 10 before they show up. Good. Let them come. We're not doing anything illegal. Boss, we've got company. Big Tommy pointed. A convoy of black SUVs screeched into the plaza from the opposite side. Jake's blood ran cold when he saw them. The remaining graveyard dogs, maybe 30 of them, and they didn't look like they were here to talk. I thought they were done. Razor growled. Hayes must have called in every favor he had. Marcus said Skull's locked up, but there are still dogs willing to take his money. The SUVs parked in a line blocking the street. Men poured out, not just bikers, but professional security contractors. Mercenaries. Hayes had upgraded his muscle. A massive man in tactical gear stepped forward, speaking through a megaphone. You have 2 minutes to disperse, or we will remove you by force. Jake walked forward calmly, stopping 10 FT from the man. We are peacefully assembled on public property. You touch anyone here, it's assault, and every camera in the city is watching. Mr. Hayes owns this property. You're trespassing. The plaza's public easement. Check your property maps. Jake smiled. But please try something. I'd love to see Hayes explain why he's sicking mercenaries on homeless families and the people helping them. The man's jaw clenched. He pressed his earpiece, listening to orders. Jake could imagine Hayes upstairs screaming at his lawyers, trying to figure out how to make this disappear. But you couldn't make 300 bikers and a dozen news crews disappear. Stand down, the mercenary finally said to his men. But you've got 1 hour after that. We're calling this a riot. We'll be done when we're done, Jake said, turning his back dismissively. That's when the first police cars arrived, but they weren't rolling in with sirens blazing. They parked peacefully at the perimeter. Captain Morrison of the Widow's Sons walked over to speak with them, showing permits, explaining the situation. One of the officers Jake recognized from his state police contact nodded toward him. The message was clear. They weren't here to break things up. They were here to keep the peace. Hayes had lost his leverage. Jake climbed onto a concrete planter, raising his voice. Victor Hayes, we know you can hear us. Come down and face what you've done. The crowd took up the chant. Hayes. 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 Windows in the tower opened as office workers joined in, some holding signs they'd made quickly. Shame and justice for Maple Street. Even Hayes' own employees were turning on him. Jamal tugged on Jake's vest. Look. The front doors of the tower opened. A man in an expensive suit emerged, flanked by lawyers and more security. Victor Hayes was in his 60s, silver-haired with the kind of face that had never known real hardship until now. He looked furious. He walked to a hastily assembled podium where the press had gathered. This is a circus, Hayes said, his voice tight with controlled rage. These people are trespassing, disturbing the peace, and harassing a legitimate business based on fabricated accusations. Fabricated. Jake's voice boomed across the plaza. We have video of your hired gang confessing to the whole thing. We have financial records. We have 17 families you made homeless. The cameras swung between them like a tennis match. Hayes' lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Hayes shoved him aside. I don't negotiate with criminals and thugs. This company has operated within the law. You bought the law. Keisha's voice rang out as she pushed through the crowd. You bought the sheriff, bought the permits, bought everything, but you can't buy the truth. She was flanked by the other Maple Street families now, all of them stepping forward. Mrs. Washington, the young mother with her baby, the old man who'd lost his medication in the chaos. The cameras ate it up. Hayes' composure cracked. If there were irregularities, they were handled by contractors who exceeded their authority. I had no knowledge. Liar, Jamal's small voice cut through everything. The plaza went silent. Every camera turned to the 8-year-old boy standing next to Jake. His little fist clenched, tears streaming down his face. You're a liar. I heard them say your name. You paid them. You took my house. You made my mom cry. Jamal's voice broke. All I had left was my scooter. You almost took that too. The image of a small boy confronting a billionaire was perfect, devastating, undeniable. Hayes's face went pale. His lawyers were pulling at him, trying to get him back inside. But the damage was done. He'd shown his face, shown his arrogance, and the world had seen it. "Mr. Hayes," a reporter shouted, "are you denying you paid the Graveyard Dogs motorcycle gang to demolish Maple Street?" "Mr. Hayes, what do you say to Jamal and the other children you made homeless?" "Mr. Hayes." Hayes turned and fled back into the building, security forming a wall behind him. But Jake smiled because in that moment, Hayes had done exactly what Jake needed him to do. He'd run, and everyone had seen it. Jake picked up Jamal, holding him high. "This boy is braver than that man will ever be." 300 bikers erupted in cheers, horns blaring, the sound rolling across the city like thunder. They'd won. Not in court. Not yet. But in the court of public opinion, Victor Hayes was finished. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in front of what used to be Maple Street, but it didn't look like a wasteland anymore. Cranes lifted steel beams into place. Construction crews, legitimate ones working under union contracts, poured foundations. Architects in hard hats consulted blueprints. And in the center of it all, a sign read, "Maple Renewal Project, funded by settlement agreement." "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Keisha said, walking up beside him. Jake nodded. 3 weeks ago, this was rubble and broken dreams. Now it's hope. The fallout had been swift and brutal for Hayes. The viral confrontation had triggered federal investigations into his entire business empire. 6 different states opened cases. His company's stock plummeted. Board members resigned. Politicians who'd taken his donations scrambled to return the money. Skull had cut a deal, testifying against Hayes in exchange for reduced charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, bribed officials, illegal demolitions across 4 states. Hayes Development had been using the same playbook for years, and Maple Street was just the latest victim. 2 days ago, Hayes had been arrested at his vacation home in the Hamptons. The perp walk footage, a billionaire in handcuffs, had been almost as viral as Jamal's confrontation. "The settlement came through," Keisha continued. $300,000 per family. Full housing costs covered during reconstruction, plus damages. And Hayes had to personally fund the new community center. Money doesn't fix everything. "No," Keisha agreed. "But it's a start. And it's justice. Real justice." Jamal ran up. No longer the scared boy from 3 weeks ago, he'd become something of a folk hero. The kid who stood up to a billionaire? Talk shows wanted him. His video had 20 million views. But Keisha had kept him grounded, kept him normal. "Mr. Jake, come see." The boy pulled him toward the construction site entrance, where something new had been installed. A community center was already partially built. The first structure completed and mounted at the entrance, enclosed in glass, was Jamal's blue scooter. Restored, repainted, shining. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "The street that fought back in memory of Maple Street and the families who refused to be silenced. Even the smallest voice can change the world. Jamal Blake, age 8. Jake felt a lump in his throat. "Okay, that's really something. Mom says we're keeping you here forever, so nobody forgets what happened. So nobody forgets that regular people can win. Your mom's a smart woman." Marcus walked over, grinning. "Reporters want one last interview before we head out. You up for it?" Jake looked at the construction, at the families who'd returned to reclaim their land. At Jamal standing proud beside his memorial scooter. "Yeah, I'm up for it." The interview was short. Yes, he was glad justice had been served. No, he didn't consider himself a hero. The families were the heroes. Yes, he'd do it again in a heartbeat. And no, this wasn't the end. There were more Maple Streets out there, more Hayes getting away with it. The Iron Stallions would be watching. As the sun set, the bikers prepared to leave. Most had already headed home days ago, but Jake's core crew had stayed to help with the early reconstruction work. Now was time to ride. "Big Tommy, check his oil. So, we ever making it to that rally in Arizona?" "Next year," Jake laughed. "This year got a little complicated." "Complicated? That's one word for it." Keisha brought out a cooler of drinks for the road. "I don't know how to thank you. All of you thank us by building something worth building." Jake said, "Make this place better than it was. Make a home people are proud of. We will." She hugged him quick and fierce. "You're always welcome here, Jake Ryder. Always." Jamal ran up and hugged Jake's waist. "You'll come visit, right? You promised. I promised. Give me a few months, let you get settled. Then I'll roll through, check out the new neighborhood. Maybe you can show me around on that scooter. It's in a glass case now. Then get a new one, a better one. You earned it." As they prepared to mount up, Reverend Mills walked over. "Mr. Ryder, a word." Jake stepped aside with the elderly pastor. "I've been a minister for 40 years, Mills said quietly. "I've seen a lot of people, good ones, bad ones, and everything in between. You know what I learned?" "What's that, Reverend?" "Angels don't always have halos. Sometimes they have leather vests and loud motorcycles." He smiled. "You gave these people their dignity back. That's sacred work. I just did what was right." "Exactly. And the world needs more people who do what's right regardless of convenience or cost." Mills extended his hand. "Ride safe, son, and God bless the Iron Stallions." Jake shook his hand, genuinely moved. "Thank you, Reverend." The engines roared to life one final time. Jake led his crew out of Maple Street down the highway toward whatever came next. In his mirror, he saw Jamal waving frantically, Keisha's arm around him. "You're getting soft in your old age," Marcus said over the comm system. "Maybe," Jake admitted. "Or maybe I'm finally getting it right." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The road stretching endlessly ahead, the way it always did, free, boundless, full of possibility. "So where to now, boss?" Razor asked. Jake thought about it. Somewhere out there, another family was getting pushed around by someone with more money and power. Another kid was losing their home. Another injustice was happening in the shadows. West Jake said, "Let's see what we find." Because that was the thing about the road. It always led somewhere, and sometimes, if you were lucky, it led you exactly where you needed to be. The Iron Stallions disappeared into the sunset, 13 bikes strong, leaving behind a legacy that would echo for years. Maple Street would be rebuilt. Victor Hayes would face trial. And somewhere in the capital, politicians were suddenly very worried about who might be watching them next. But Jake didn't think about legacy or politics or fame. He thought about a boy with a scooter who'd found his courage. He thought about a mother who'd gotten her hope back. He thought about 17 families who'd learned they weren't powerless. And he smiled beneath his helmet, opened the throttle, and rode toward whatever tomorrow held. Because some people wore badges to protect and serve. Some wore suits to make laws and policy. But Jake Ryder wore leather and road steel. And he protected people too. One highway stop, one injustice, one fight at a time. The road stretched on forever. And he wouldn't have it any other way.